It's great to see everybody. Aloha, everyone. It's great to see everybody here in person. And great to have everybody who is joining us online. This webinar is part of a series of webinars. This is the third for this semester. And we've been focusing on questions related to field schools and working in partnership with institutions in Southeast Asia. This event is hosted in person at the East-West Center, but also hosted online by the UH Center for Southeast Asian Studies. And I'm really excited about today's discussion because we get to hear directly from student participants in our field school in Southeast Asia. So I also want to say thanks to the Henry Luce Foundation for funding such a unique initiative such as this one. So about a year ago, we started planning for a joint field school in Southeast Asia, working with partners at Hasanuddin University in Sulawesi, as well as Khon Kaen University in Thailand. And we had all sorts of different levels of students involved. So we had undergraduates, masters, and PhD students who got to participate in a field school in Sulawesi and Khon Kaen, and then we met up afterwards in Cambodia to discuss the role of field schools. In terms of pedagogy and learning at universities and other educational institutions, field schools are a really interesting sort of a teaching method, right? How do you go to the field? What do you learn when you go to the field? How do you do it right? How can it be beneficial to local communities? How do you work in the right ways with your partners? And when we initially started, we really wanted it to be based on initiatives that our local partners are working on. So our partners in Sulawesi, our partners in Thailand were fundamental in guiding the type of research project that was involved here. So very loosely, the project is interested in agrarian transition. Please come in. Looking at issues of rural livelihoods and governance. In Thailand, it was much more focused on water resource management. And we basically matched up students from here at the University of Hawaii with students from the university programs there. And there's just a lot of thanks that must be said for everybody that was involved who helped do this. There was tons of Zoom meetings that helped to get the topics right and the mechanics right. We had research assistants working on developing curriculums of how to do environmental ethics. We were practicing this stuff on campus before we went. And for those in the room here who attended the first session, we were able to present to the East-West Center and University of Hawaii community what we were planning to do. So this is really exciting. We're back and we're talking about what we actually learned. And it's great. Today we'll get a chance to see pictures and hear actual stories of what happened in the field. And I think it raises a lot of questions about how, especially after the pandemic, how Zoom has entered into our teaching methods. How do we go to the field? How do we learn together? How do we learn in better sorts of ways, in more equitable sorts of ways, in ways that give back to the communities that we're engaging with? And how do we get better at doing that? So hopefully the reflections from the students today will really help us to think about how we can design better programming in the future. So without further ado, I want to give a chance for our panelists today, very diverse across the experiences in the field, to introduce themselves. I'll start with Fatwa Rahman, who's on a line, and we're going to share a little bit about which institutions we're from and what our research interests are about. Fatwa, you have the floor.
Okay, so yeah, good, I think afternoon in Honolulu. Good morning from Makassar, Indonesia. So yeah, I'm Fatwa Rahman. I'm currently spend much of my time at Forest, we call at Forest and Society Research Group. in Faculty of Forestry, Hasanuddin University Indonesia. Who was the local university host for this field school program. Yeah, working as a young researcher here, and I just finished my master's study a couple of months ago, researching about everyday farmer resistance, and I was till now still interested in the field of social, especially agrarian movement study, and always loving to be or working in the village and the field. So yeah, so I was involved in preparing in mostly all anything about this field school with our organization here, and that was including preparing all logistic stuff about this field school, how we decide the two village site for this field school, and also how we decide the team for both village in Rompe Gading and Batu Noni village as the sites for this field school. So I also joined the team, the others, to go to the field to conduct the field work in Rompe Gading village in Maros Regency, Sulawesi, Indonesia. And yeah, I was almost the time in the field, like around 7 days in Rompegani village. I was with Anna and also Sarah in Rompegading, and that's for the introduction for this field school. I think this all.
Thanks, Fatwa. We're going to continue with our online participants. Dalila, can you introduce yourself next and tell us how you got involved in this field school and your expectations about it?
Okay, hi, yes, good morning from Banai. My name is Dalila. I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of Geography and Environment. I was an ISWA Center graduate degree fellow, so it's always good to be back at Burns Hall, even though virtually. I wish I could see the people in the room, but I hear Dean's Anne's voice and Miriam, so hello. Yeah, my research is based in Palu, Central Sulawesi, Indonesia. I look at how people remember and memorialize tragic effects of earthquakes, tsunami, and liquefaction that hit Palu in 2018, and how these processes of memorializing disaster can contribute to community resilience to future hazards. I think this is where it comes in, why I joined the field school, since my research is based in Indonesia, and I thought the field school is a good opportunity for me to learn more Bahasa Indonesia, outside of the Duolingo app, and watching many cinetrons, the Indonesian dramas, and movies, right? Anticipation to work in local, in Palu. And glad I did join the field school, that I applied, because I learned more about local expressions that no one taught in class, or no person in Duolingo taught me. And the intonation was different. When we arrived in Makassar, they have their own dialect. So that was really a good experience for me. And I also wanted to learn more about the practicalities and the experience of fieldwork, collaboratively with folks with multiple cultural and disciplinary backgrounds, what methods work and what does not, if a method does not work, and how can we overcome that. Yeah, that's where I'm coming into the field school.
Okay, great. Thanks. Anna, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Anna Dewar. I am a second-year master's student in the Department of Geography and Environment. And I sort of came into this field school primarily interested in just getting exposure to field work. I didn't necessarily have a regional focus for my research yet. So I was exploring Southeast Asia and Indonesia as a potential site for that research, and really just using this opportunity as a way to sort of risk-free try out what fieldwork looks like without having my degree or thesis writing on it necessarily. It was just an amazing sort of eye-opening experience. So I was, I think, the only UH master's student, so I was a little bit less experienced when it came to things like fieldwork. So I just saw this as a really great learning opportunity, and I'm really glad I took advantage of it.
Ariel.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Ariel. I'm a PhD student in the Department of Political Science. I'm also a student at ISWA Center and previous graduate degree fellow. let's see, I'm from the UH side. I'm one of the 2 students that came from a non-geography department. When I started my PhD, I knew I wanted to do field work and do an ethnographic research, but it is not the kinds of it is not a we don't offer this kind of research method course in our department. So I started to take classes outside of the department, and then had a class with Dr. Fisher here, Pamaika, and in geography, and then begin to read a lot of literature outside of political science and become really interested with the idea of fieldwork. And so it was really, for me, going to the field school was a training to do my own research. I'm going to begin my research this January, and the field school was a great preparation for me, and happy to talk more later. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. So you can see how diverse kind of the backgrounds of the researchers, not just from the University of Hawaii here, but also from Hasanuddin University. Unfortunately, we don't have somebody from Konkan University, but their focus was a lot more water resource focus, and that's the kind of issues that they were looking at in the field. So let's start at the beginning. Like, what did you think about, what were your expectations of tell us about the anxieties, your expectations, what happened when you got to the field, how this changed your ideas about methods, and talk a little bit about some of the ethics of those issues as well. And since we started online before, we'll start from in the room this time.
So I can go ahead and start talking about some of my methods, but before I go into that, so I'm coming from, I was born and raised in suburban Minnesota. I don't necessarily blend in even in a place like Hawaii, let alone in a place like Indonesia or Southeast Asia. So for me, there wasn't necessarily so much anxiety around the idea of doing international field research, but rather just an excitement about it. And sort of, I had very little expectations going into it. I'd read about fieldwork. I had read fieldwork reports and various papers and stuff, but it's all very different when you're actually experiencing it. So the methods that I used, I think, were definitely shaped by my both lack of experience, but also sort of my role within the research teams that we had. So I spent 3 weeks in Yogyakarta learning Bahasa Indonesia before embarking in fieldwork. And 3 weeks can only get you so far. For me, that got me really good at ordering fried rice that wasn't super spicy. Did get literally burned by that one time, but I learned. I was very good at pointing to objects and naming them, but in terms of having an in-depth, sort of emotionally intelligent conversation, I wasn't quite able to do that. Maybe give me another week and then I could have done that. But going into the field, I wasn't necessarily going to be our point person running interviews. And so I really focused on visual methods and what I was looking at, and sort of trying to figure out ways to capture what I was looking at, but also make sense of what I was looking at. And so this picture that you can see here was taken at sort of at our base camp. And what you see here is I'm on my phone in the middle looking at pictures that we had taken that day in the field. And then on the iPad in front of us that Pak Hussein and Micah are pointing at is a map of where we were. And we were trying to place the pictures into context with the actual map that we were looking at. So we had a way of sort of visually sort of depicting what we were seeing on the ground. And if you go to the next slide, a lot of the images that I ended up taking, we ended up doing annotations on top of. So this is actually a screenshot of a map, a 3D map of the area that we were in. And what I was able to do was, because I was spending so much time focusing on where we were going and what we were looking at when we were there, I was able to make a compilation of all the different days and plot the routes that we had walked, because that was our primary method, was walk and talk. And so I was able to plot these different methods. And then if you go to the next slide, I took a lot of pictures and ended up doing what I called live annotations. So what I would do was I would take my tablet to the field and I would take a picture of the landscape that I was looking at and analyzing, and then doing my best, I would sketch out what I was looking at so that I had an association with the image, so that when I went back at it, I knew exactly what I was looking at. And so in the field, I was able to do this very briefly. You can see I just have national park forest marked out, rice that was alternated with peanuts. But then in those conversations with Micah and Pak Hussein, I was able to get a little bit more detail as about what we were specifically looking at. And so then on this slide, this is another sort of creative method that we came up with in the field, because we were in a very rural area, and a lot of the sort of traditional tools that relied on cell phone data didn't necessarily work super well for us. So we actually used the geotags from the photos that we took, because I, as someone who didn't necessarily understand the spoken or written language very well, was really heavily relying on what I was seeing. And so because our smartphones were able to have geographic coordinates associated with each location, this helped us to map where we were going, because we didn't necessarily always have a planned route, and we certainly weren't on paved roads or anything that was mapped. So then we were able to sort of take all of this visual data that we had and put it into something a little bit more refined. And so we used ArcGIS Online to combine the sort of primitive pictures with drawings on top of them that we started with those geotagged locations, making it a little bit more specific, and then incorporating actual sort of formal drawn out boundaries to put ourselves into context with the location that we were looking at. And I think there's one more picture. So this is what a lot of this looks like actually in the field. So we were in these densely wooded areas. You can see I'm pretty cluelessly following Pak Hussein, which we named the forest sage because he truly knew this area like the back of his hand. And while I had very little idea what was being said around me, I definitely knew sort of what was being pointed out, and I could pick up on bits of conversations and different bits that were translated. But I was definitely more focused on what the surroundings looked like and how our individual team members and our research subjects sort of interacted with their environments. That was how I tried to navigate my use of methods in the field. And these methods definitely evolved over time, over the 2 weeks that we were there. You know, I started out having no clue what was happening, even when it was happening. And then, you know, as I got a little bit more comfortable with people I was working with, was able to develop some of these more sophisticated, if you will, methods, none of which I had read about before, but ended up being stuff that actually really worked well for me.
Just one note about that picture that you're looking at. So the issues that we're working on, that was in a national park, right? In a national forest. And the story that was being told there was basically the rubble of that person's home, an ancestral home where they'd been from. And so these stories are pretty harrowing in terms of eviction and violence that happened in the 1950s and 60s. And the ability to have conversations like that, whereas otherwise you would read about it and look at it like a map like this. Oh, that's the national park, gives so much texture and complexity into having conversations about research that's talking about environmental change. Who wants to go next? Ariel, would you like to go next? Okay.
Yeah, so like the Indonesia team, like Anna, the folks who went to Thailand, we also started with 3-week Thai language program in Chiang Mai University. And then before we went to the field, I think one of the things that made this program to be very well thought is that, it is the idea that it's teaching us that we shouldn't just go to the field directly, but we should begin by learning the language and also the culture of the place. And of course, this is just a simulation of what an actual fieldwork looks like, because when you do actual fieldwork, you should take a year-long language program and a semester-long methods program. But we begin with the methods training facilitated by Olivia here, and then the language program. So we had a bit of preparation to as a process of learning the place before we actually went to the field school. Let's see. So when we went to the field itself, for me, a lot of the things Anna said, I shared too. But for example, I went to the field and had this really big idea. I came in with a, I'm this PhD student, I'm really cool. I came in with big questions and my frameworks. I read a lot of books and immediately realized that they're not really important. Of course, they're important to us, but they're not important to the people that we met. That is because, and a story, my favorite story is that I went in and then we have all of our questions written down. And one of my questions is, how has your crop changed over the last 10 years, right? So this is a question that makes sense to me because I want to understand about agrarian transitions in Northeast. But this question does not make sense to our partners. They do not make sense to our interviewees. And part of this program is we travel with a senior, more senior researchers. And so for Thailand team, we had Dr. Ming Lee here. So she was able to help us as students to reframe our questions. So instead of asking people, how has your crop changed over the last 10 years? We asked, when did you start planting guava, right? Like, so because no matter the questions that we ask, like whether or not people understand the question, they're really nice and they try to answer a question, right? Because to them it's not important that they get the correct, they give us correct answers or not. But for us as a researchers, if we want to get the correct answer, we need to know how to ask a better questions. So that was a big part of learning about probing the questions. And then another thing that I want to highlight is access. So can you go back to the yes. So at the heart of this field school is the idea of collaborative research, right? But collaborative research in our project is not just about increasing parity for researchers from the US and local researchers in the Southeast Asia, but it is, to us, it is also about gaining access to the field, right? There is this assumption from my side that, like the people are always there passively waiting for us to go and collect the data. And that is not true. Like without collaborating with local universities, we wouldn't be able to gain access to the people that we interview. For example, in the picture, the old man, his name is Posunam. He sits next to the lady in the blue blouse. We call him the research gatekeeper. He decides who we are going to interview for the day, right? So because we're foreigners and he needed to tell everyone in the village that some foreigners are coming so that people are aware that we are there. And then let's see. Oh, and then can you go? And then another thing about access that I want to talk about is the dynamic of insider outsider. And I'm sure that a lot of grad students in Methods College, you talk about this a lot. That we often think that being insider is always give you more advantage over the researchers that are coming from the outside. But in this case, for example, in this photo, we interview the government officials at the Royal Irrigation Department. And our partners in Konkan, they said that the reason why we're able to secure that interview because we're foreigners, right? So being foreigners enable some sort of access that locals wouldn't be able to get. And then this is a photo of all of our research partners. There's we work with 2 faculty from Konkan University and then 2 students from Department of Agriculture. And then there are some government officials. Yeah, so I just leave it at that and then give it to other people.
Okay, why don't we go to Dalila to talk about the other Sulawesi site?
Okay. Finn, can you pull up the slides, please? Thank you. Right. So I was part of the Indonesian team. What Anna was presenting earlier, that's one of the sites, and my site was based in, I think, north of Makassar in the Enrikan Regency. We call it Batunoni Village. So for our team, our fieldwork focuses on exploring or scoping issues. I think it's almost similar to like pre-dissertation fieldwork. You're trying to test out, your research questions, see what works. So we were scoping issues related to shallots production, which was, I think, pretty broad topic. We did not really have a research questions in place, but we did have like an overarching idea of looking for who does what question when we went on the field, and we just went with that. So for our team, I think we did a lot of walking around. Next slide. For our team, we just like the Rompa guiding team, we did a lot of walking around the village to gather different perspectives from people of different backgrounds. The walking is also part of our field observation as we, familiarize ourselves with the physical and man-made features required for shallot cultivation and gaining more insights into the place that we stayed in, the local culture, and the livelihoods. And from the walking too, we were invited to, to go under the house because that's also where the shallot production was taking place, right? As you can see in the previous slide, in the last picture. Can you go to the previous slide? Sorry. Anyway, yeah. So in the third picture right there, it's one of our team member, Durhadi. He was taking a picture of these auntie cleaning out the shallots. So these are the different places that we did our observation on the road. We try to trace the water springs, that's in the second picture, and then we just keep walking around and explore the place during the first day. And then lucky for us, I remember asking question why people are really welcoming, right? Like, oh, come over, where are you from? And we became, because we're from other place, whether it's from Makassar or from Brunei or from Hawaii, like Hawaii, that too opened up certain access and people start inviting, they want to talk to us. And yeah, and from there we built more relationships with the local community there. And then the next slide. And the walks also, I think, brought us to seeing villagers working on their land. And one was, at that time, I remember during our second day, we saw people harvesting the shallots and we saw people planting the seeds, which we just so happened like to stumble upon when we're doing, a recon. And I think because we didn't have a research questions in place, so we engaged more in a casual conversation, doing small talks. And like in that picture there, Ipang was just talking to that guy while we were for I think like half an hour, while all of other team members like taking pictures and talking to the other person. I think he did a good deep hanging out with the person because we gained a lot of more information and insights into the place. And but I think to echo what Ariel was talking about being an insider and outsider, I say we definitely experience it in Batunoni as well. I think being locals, we have a different story. Yes, outsider opens up, certain access. Being an insider too, right? Helped out collaboratively, like ease communication, bridging communication between us, the Bahasa Indonesia speakers to the locals there. But I have a funny story, like being locals or looking like ones, because I was with two of my team members. We went, to do this, a drop-in question, trying to see who the king of shallots was. And we went to one of his stores. And it turns out, I think it's from the way we ask the questions as well. It sounds interrogative or journalistic, like, oh, where's this Pak Haji? How many lands does he have? So that was a mistake. How many lands? Where are his other shops? When did he start? All these journalistic way of asking questions. And then initially, the person was hesitant to ask those questions. Oh, the Pak Haji was not around, or oh, we're busy right now, and things like that. But we kept pushing, or at least one of my friends kept pushing. And then eventually we got all the answers, and then he started opening up. Oh, you know what? Initially, I thought you were some tax collector who's trying to audit this Pak Haji's land. And I said, okay, being local, looking like the local was also has its own, repercussions. And also, I think it's a lesson learned, right? The way you ask questions, what kind of questions asked to have a repercussion on people's response, and the kind of data that you're going to get from people. Next slide. So the conversations and questions that were asked were also inspired or sparked by our curiosity of doing things, right? So we tried, because coming into the field school, I remember Micah was asking this question, like, how can you contribute to, to this field school? And I said, oh, if you want me to do some farming, get my hand dirty, I'll do that. And we did that for a few minutes, and that was fun. And we get to, loosen up a little bit with the people. They're more opening up, like, oh, where are you guys from? Oh, this is how you do it. Even though we only helped her planting like 5 rows of seeds compared to like that huge area of land. So there's that. I think this participating and learning and understanding by doing gives us more insight into the inner workings of our object of study at that time. Next. Yes, so to work collaboratively, so for my team, we have different roles. If one is doing interview, it's mostly our local partners. I'm so grateful for them. They could speak the language, they could speak the local dialect as well, and they were helpful in, asking questions, and their a more extrovert personality was also helpful too. So for my team, we work in groups of 2 or 3 people, and we took on different roles, as I mentioned earlier. For example, like when one of my team members was doing the interview, I would take photos and videos of the landscapes and activities that were happening at that time. So what happened is we have these extensive visual documentation, and when we put together on a Google Drive when we arrived in Makassar, and it was very helpful during our debriefing and discussions, especially when we were trying to put together our story maps for the workshop that we were having in Simrip. And these visuals were also helpful and also serve as a mnemonic tool, right? Reminding us of, oh yeah, that's where the pipes were, reminding us of the study context when it was taken, as most importantly, bridging communication between us and the local partners as well. And this documentation has been exhaustive for many times. We put it on social media for the FS people to use to tell people what's going on the field, and it's been fun doing the whole photo taking and videos. Next. And as we come together at the end of the day during the field work, my team, I think the other team as well, the Rompa Guiding team, we took an hour or so to debrief and to compare notes. And this is helpful when, for example, like I might have missed something that was said by, Pak Haji or the Ibu Haji or something on the field, and the missing part will eventually come up during the debriefing and even on the field notes. So this exercise, in a way, helps complete the narrative and stories of our other team members. I think if we were doing this I think this is the benefit of doing field work in a group, because others can fill you in on the things that you might have missed. I can't imagine doing an individual research. You might have to talk to yourself, but this one was a great exercise. And this video was taken at the place that we were staying in, and we just going back and forth, and whatever that we came up with, the things that we discussed, we use it as a pointers for the next day. What are the things that we want to find out the next day? Where should we start? That was really helpful. And after the whole field work, next slide, after the whole field work and debriefing, we wanted to use the story map to present our stories, right? But as we all know, like story maps, our GIS story maps only allow 1% access. So thanks to Scott Allen, who were preparing us before the field work, he came up with this story map template. So we worked together, put it on a projector, and my team and I looked at, okay, what do you want to put for land and water resources, and then what kind of stories do you want to tell? And then we also included, some media, so that it'll be easier for one of my team member to put it on the story map, and to add more depth, like we use verbatim quotes, and we just add on rows and columns for that. And I think that really worked for collaborative research work, story maps, if you use the template as well. And I highly recommend if anyone was trying to use that. And next. And this is, I think, one of the outputs of our story map. You can find it. I think our Krishna and Olivia did mention about our story map as well in the previous webinar, and go in. So this is the front layer or the main page of our story map. Next page. And these are some of the things that you could include, right? You can include maps, and with the quotes and then some pictures, you can do the whole transition like what we see on TikTok and Instagram nowadays. Story Map has it too, so we're cool. And we could also include videos. So in the last picture on the bottom right, it was a video of this motorcycle, washing through and bringing the packs of shallots. It's just too bad we can't play it here, but if you check out our Story Map, you can see all of those. Yeah. That's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dalila. What's so interesting is we're seeing snapshots of different village level engagements, and you can see the differences of the methods. I want to take you back to Rompe Gading. Fatwa has some more to add about the field level engagement.
Okay, can you please add the slide? Yeah, so I was the part of the Anna's team in Rompe Gading village, is in Maros Regency. It's like a different village with Dalila, who was in the upland area, and then I was in the upland area as well, but Dalila has the coolest area one. And yeah, can you please
Give us a second.
okay, because I just want to talk about the picture.
Yeah, while they're pulling that up, I can talk a little bit about working with Fatwa as a research partner. It was a great experience, but he was sort of my intermediary in a lot of this, as someone who understood English, but also was able to understand the local dialects. He definitely taught me a lot about myself, but now he gets to talk about his methods and slides.
Can you go before this slide? Before, yeah, this one. Okay, so in terms of the main what I learned from this school, so while Dalila's team follow one communities in Batunali village, we were following several communities. So I just learned about the how we follow one community and how we follow several communities. So when Dalila's team focused on just one community, which was salad, we were follow several communities. So we pursue one community per day. So we have like 6 to 7 days. So we have 6 to 7 commodities in the Rompe Gading village, and then talking about that every night and every afternoon, like you can see on the slide. So we were like have a debriefing of the after walking around and walking in the forest and pursue the commodities, and then we discuss about that, and we write and we have a note about what we got at the day. And then this time I just wanna also talk about my personal perspective about this field school. So this was my first experience working with the young researcher from many countries. So I'm used to work international collaborative research, but it just only with like a meeting in the Zoom, and then was writing on the docs, but doing a field work and then having an intense day, an intense conversation in the field. This was my first time with the team from the Hawaii University, and then it was so enjoyable. It was so fun for me because yeah, everyone, it was so chill in doing this field activity. So this is what we did when we interview some of villagers. So practically we in Rompe Gading village, our team used like several languages, which was absolutely English, Indonesian, Melayu as well because of Sarah was there, and also Bugis and Makassar. So in Rompe Gading we have two local languages, which was Bugis and Makassar, and also we talk Indonesian in local dialect. So when we talk with the local people, we mix the languages. We mix Indonesian, we mix Bugis, we mix Makassar language, and thanks to Mika as well, because Mika has a lot of experience, a lot of insight about Indonesian context, and also have many empirical reasons about the issues in Sulawesi. So he has a significant role in helping us to interpret, to translate what the local people say, to get more understand about the issue, and also help Anna because we need to translate many languages. And this is my personal view of this field school. So instead of field school, this program was like tend to be an English school for me because I was much more got English improvement through this program instead of a field work stuff, because I'm used to work in the field before this field school program, and also before this field school graduate student come to Makassar, we had also already met with Senan, who was one of the geographical graduate students who has conducting her master research in Maros as well, one of the villages in Maros. So when I was meeting with Senan, I was like, oh, she speaks so fast, but after Anna's come, I was like, oh shit, oh Anna's faster than Shannon. So I was like, oh, okay. But eventually I already used to talk with them, and then but it's not happened to our other researcher who has a lack of English. But this field school for them, I was talking with them after this field school, after this field work activities, and then they taught me that this field school help them to improve the English. At least be confident to speak with the native speaker, which like Anna, like Micah in English, and then so this program is like empowering us so much about English skills. So please next. So this is related to our method in Rompe Gading team. So in the left one, the picture is which was in I think in the morning, how we plan, how we discuss about the day and what we have to do at the day. And then the second picture is like night discussion, because every time when we have already go to the field, like in the forest and in the paddy field, and then every night we talk about that, we discuss about it, what we got in at the daytime, and then we take an hour and we discuss about our reflection of every day, and what we have to do in the next day, what commodity we have to looking for in the next day. So that's our daily routine in Rompe Gading team. And next please. And then I always talk about we walk so far. So this is the how we represent our daily activity as well in Rompe Gading. So sometimes we have a serious mode, but sometimes we have also serious, but as you can see, we are already tired and we just lie, and then still discussion until we get to sleep. So next, please. So this yeah. So in Rompegading we ride motorbike to go to the many places in the village, and also walking so much in the forest. And as you can see, we were in the river, and then just take a photo of them, and then we were also go to the upland and go to the lowland within the village. And next, please. And this is represent the upland in Rompegading village. In the up one and in the bottom picture one was like in the lowland. Is kind of no, it's not a peanuts land. And then in the upland it's like also peanuts, but with the corn as well. So we pursue corn, we pursue peanuts commodities. And next please. And this is where when we pursue the pine trees commodities within the forest. Through the paddy fields, and yeah, just like that. I think that's the last slide of my presentation. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I just, one of those pictures, I was in there, and I just want to highlight, you see how the way it's kind of like it was a chain of interpreting going on. But we were in this place, which is, Indonesia is so complicated with the number of languages between valleys. So we were in this place between where they spoke Makassar and Bugis. And so Fatwa knew how to speak Bugis and Dila knew how to speak Makassar. So it went from them having this conversation and the two of them trying to piece it out. Then it would go to Indonesian and then to Anna. So like 5 languages were in play at any given time, which actually structured the way we set up to have an interview or to talk to people, to meet people on the side of the road and things like that.
Yeah, in terms of physical proximity, I definitely tried to align myself either closest to Micah or Sarah in the field because they were the people who were able to translate best to my debrief sessions when we were sort of in those circles at night. We developed a sort of Google Docs method. So I was able to understand the conversation because I was definitely the odd person out in terms of sort of least language understanding. And so what would happen is people would be typing on a Google Doc that we would all have access to. And so Micah could translate into English what was being said in Indonesian, and I was able to read it and follow along. And then when I spoke, vice versa was able to happen. But the language was definitely sort of a very interesting thing from my perspective, not only being exposed to so many languages at once, but I definitely learned a lot about myself in this process. So I was the only sort of born and raised English speaker on our team. I was not the only English speaker, but in terms of born and bred American, you know, that was what I was. I was born and raised near the heartland of the Midwest. So in terms of American, I'm about as American as it gets. And so that was interesting, and being put in the context of people who had learned English as a second or third language, realizing how quickly I spoke. Sorry, Fatwa. But Fatwa had the courage to tell me to slow down a lot, which was great. He'd be like, Anna, that was great, but say it slower. I'd be like, okay, cool. I'll say it again. Or realizing how many sort of colloquialisms I spoke in, and that even like other English speakers didn't understand. They were like, no, that's not an English thing. That's a you thing. And don't repeat that. Like, that's not standard English. Don't repeat those. But yeah, those were just some of the ways that we were able to sort of navigate those conversations. But as I became more comfortable speaking in my very broken, other people became more comfortable speaking in their broken English. And so we were actually able to have some pretty good conversations.
I think you make a good point about communication. Do you want to show the slide of your relationship with Dila? Because it really showed that understanding each other really transcends beyond sort of language.
Yeah, right? So this is sort of a cliche, friendship knows no language or whatever. But on the right, you can see me and Dila, one of our research partners from Unhas, and of the team, she was closest in age to me, and spoke very sort of limited English, understood a decent amount, but we definitely weren't able to have conversations with each other. But she quickly became one of my best friends in the field, not because we were able to have conversations with each other, but because we both knew the same internet references and TikTok references, and we would send each other little videos. We knew all the lyrics to every Taylor Swift song. And so that was truly how we began to communicate with each other. But we were able to work very effectively together. We became motorbike buddies, and the amount of laughs that we shared, both because we didn't understand what the other person was saying, or because we knew exactly what the other person was saying without having to say much at all, was pretty incredible. And one of my favorite memories, we were on the motorbike coming back from someplace in the village or up in the highlands, and some ducks walked by the street, and we both turned to each other and just go quack, quack, quack. We were on such the same wavelength, but understood very little of what each other was saying. But we just had such a similar personality, and we're so close in age and likeness, that we were able to have this really great relationship. And then the other picture on the left, you can see a small child has clung to my legs, and this happened in the field, and in a peanut field. And so this is a pretty special moment. We started at their house, and the adults were having a conversation, and I have about the same language skills as a 2-year-old. And so I'm like, well, I'm gonna speak to some of my own age and talk to the kid. And so, well, the sort of more experienced people were having a conversation. I was engaging with this little boy who was maybe no more than 5 years old. And he kept asking me, apa bahasa Inggrisnya blank? How do you speak in English blank word? And, unless he could point to it, or it was one of the very few words I knew, I had no idea what this kid was saying. But I really wanted him to like me. So I was just making up English words like left and right. So deepest apologies to this child if he now has a misconstrued perception of English. But then, they took us up into their field and he followed. And then, as we were leaving, he, runs out from behind, a pile of peanuts and, starts like clinging to my legs. And I'm like, what am I taking you back, to Hawaii with me? But that was just, a pretty special opportunity. So I think I was able to make a lot of deep connections with people despite not speaking the same language as them, but definitely learning a lot. And now, I think the takeaways are that kid probably thinks a lot of English words are not what they are, and Dila pronounces watermelon, watermelon now. So those were my lasting impacts, but definitely a truly special opportunity. And Dila and I are still Instagram friends, and now everyone in our research team knows the words to Cruel Summer by Taylor Swift, because that's a universal language, even if English isn't.
Yes, burned into my brain. It really highlights just, how working in a team of research, going to the field, going into uplands, going to peanut farms that are inside a national park sort of settings like this, how everybody can contribute in different sorts of ways. And it only strengthens the relationships that you can build in the overall interests of things that seem really academic, like land use change, different commodities and how they influence the landscape, but also that these are real families and people dealing with day-to-day issues and how it relates to institutions. So a lot of learning that was associated with that. I want to turn to Ariel now, because from a language and cultural exchange perspective, you're from Timor-Leste, and you had thought you were going to be joining the Indonesia team because you had a background of speaking some Bahasa Indonesia, and it turned out you got placed in Thailand, having to do 3 weeks of language training in Thai. So can you tell us a little bit about your experiences of working across the language culture divide?
So the difference between Bahasa Indonesia and Thai is the Thai language. We learn how to speak, but not how to read, because the script is different. And we learned in Chiang Mai, and then we learned the Central Thai. But then we went to the Northeast. They speak Isan, which is not Thai, so it became not useful. I mean, there's still a lot of things that are useful. I mean, like they can speak Central Thai, I think, like generally, but they prefer the Isan language. Let's see. I think I also resonate with a lot of things that my peers have already said. The translation is a big part of it. But instead of talking about like how we lost in translation, I want to talk about how we make translations work. So in my group, we had my research partner from the UH, Kara. She and I, we divided into two teams. So she looks into the crops and I look into water resources. So in my team, and then my research partner San from Konkan, and then Dr. Min Lee, and we struggle a lot with language because we speak very little Thai, and our partner also speak very little English. So we use Google Translate. We use like the methods that were available to us. And then, can you go to the other slide? Not this one, sorry. Next one.
Oh, she's playing.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, this one, yeah. So sometimes the way that he would translate things for us is like through drawing. So like we always ask the questions like, where do you get your water? So when people start explaining about their water, they explain in a complicated landscape, so it's very difficult to translate. So he would draw these maps, and then we would come back at night and then do a lot of debriefing, like what folks in Indonesia share as well. I'm very thankful for him because he's very patient. We both of us were very patient, and we worked through a lot of translations. And at night, despite like being very tired, we stay up and then drinking a lot of beers, not sponsored by the Henry Luce Foundation, and sunflower seed. And I learned that that's how the one thing that makes Sun really happy, and then it keeps us awake and like going through our notes. And then let's see. Oh, the video, I guess. Yeah. Learning by doing, that's also a big part of our research experience as well, like how we overcome like translation, because our partners, they keep talking about how people talk about open door, the government open door and the government closed door. Like that's it didn't make sense to us. But the fun thing about doing research in rural Southeast Asia is we can travel to these places and see directly what this means. But this is a video of the water. This is I believe irrigation gate or irrigation canal. So we illegally, let's just say we close back, but we open the door because we want to be a troublemaker and hero to the farmers. They talk about how they were sad that the government closed the door during the dry season. So like we also like explore what does these places look like too. And I think even in Thai, the language, the word for foreigner is farang, but if you're from Southeast Asia, you're not farang, right? Like you're not a foreigner. And but a lot of our informants, there's a lot of curiosity about us as well, right? Because it's not just us being curious about the place that we studied, but they're also curious about us. So building rapport with the people were extremely important to us as well. And sometimes we had to buy the food that they prepare, like the somtam. And if you eat pie salad, it is really good in Northeast. And this is a part of our experience is also being invited to community events as well. And let's just say we were treated like ambassadors, like diplomats. Everybody who greeted us wore matching T-shirts. they prepare a lot of food, and then Dr. Millie had to pray in at least 10 shrines, right? But I don't know, like anyone want to talk about it, but yeah, that was part of like how like the communities were really curious, and they want us to be part of their community as well, and show us what they have. I guess, yeah, more or less.
Okay, I have a couple more questions that I'd like to ask, but I actually want to take this. We have about 30 minutes for Q&A. I want to get some participation from the audience here. I think, you know, I, having participated in this, have the context for being in the field at one of the 3 sites. But I'm really curious to how people react to these experiences, right? A lot of the focus has been on language and relationships and funny stories that have emerged from the field, but also related to really, really important issues on really serious topics. So I'm really curious what reactions you all are having to these experiences. So I want to open up the floor for questions. If you do have a question, we were hoping people would be more upfront, but please hit the audio button to ask a question.
If you don't ask questions, I start saying every animal I know in Indonesian. There's about 5 of them, so someone ask a question.
Since everyone's being so shy, I guess I'll start. I wanted to introduce myself for people who don't know me. I'm Miriam Stark, and I'm currently the director for the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. And this is group. And everything you're talking about sounds really familiar to me. The only difference is if you're with that group for 10 months, it's not always fun, but it's great. And I just think that there are important issues that may be helpful for geography grad students to know about before you go in the field. Archaeologists, we're like sheep. We work together. We don't necessarily get along. I mean, we don't like each other, but we work together because we have to. So we're really familiar with group situations, but it's very different to work on an archaeological project, which is what I usually do, than to do ethnography. And doing ethnography takes a lot of experience. It struck me when you were talking that for several of you, you have said here and elsewhere how grateful you are that you've had an opportunity to get this experience as part of your, you know, long-term training in the field. And I wanted to thank you for sharing your insights.
Mary.
Yeah, thanks so much for this presentation. So there's actually a lot of us here from the research methods and human geography class, and we're all keen to learn more about research methods. But I think we've heard a lot about what went well for you guys. Could you share a little bit about maybe things that you would do differently next time, or any advice for budding researchers about to leave the field in the next year or two?
Nope, it was perfect. No, please be as candid as you'd like to share about some of the challenges and issues that you face. I think you have a lot of insights on those issues now. Who wants to go first?
I'll sort of start us off. So I mean, I think the easy scapegoat, you know, to go to is language. You know, I wish I had more language understanding, but also I don't know if, you know, any amount of language would have been give me the abilities to have the conversations I really wanted to have. But I think sort of the thing that I maybe took away most from it, or what was, you know, sort of a challenge or something that I really had to think about myself, was I really just sort of let down like any barriers that I had, any ideas of, you know, ego or, trying to save myself from being embarrassed or anything like that. I just sort of made myself the butt of every joke, and sort of, shared any experience or story that I thought would either make someone laugh or they would be able to connect with me over. And so just really trying to, sort of do everything I could to, have conversations with people, even if that, maybe didn't make me look like the most put together person ever. I certainly wasn't. But I think that was something really important that I didn't necessarily think I would have to do going into it, is sort of, just make myself the most approachable person I could. But I think for me, because I think people were able to see who I really was, and they were able to either like me or hate me for that.
Yeah, I
Challenge.
think to echo about language, because I can Indonesia, but my level of speaking is still beginner, which is shameful. Having a casual understanding and to the people, to the Ibu or the people that we stayed with, because opening up is two-way street, right? So we start connecting. It was a little too late and we started connecting over and even like sharing religious values. That from my experience actually opened up more, and you could see in her demeanors and the way she talks that we gained more of her trust. So that would be something. It begs the question, like, how much opening up should you do to trust you, living in their house, doing research there in the area.
American context in as I already mentioned before, so in Rompegadin context, we translate over 5 languages, 5 different languages. So we have like I have to remember about the local term about something, about thing, about commodities, trees, for example, and then translate into Indonesia, and then translate into English, and so something like that. So that's the only challenge I was.
Okay, thanks, Fatwa. I think the language and relationship stuff, I think there's a lot of complexity, and I think we've learned a lot about that today. I would say that speaking from somebody who supported meaning that I do a field study very quickly. A perspective on that would be like, oh, well, you need a research permit, right? And if you go into having to permit, you could be waiting 9 months before you go to the field. So a lot of the issues that study abroad research, field study sort of in that a lot of times when you're going somewhere, you decide what the program is going to be. Well, we wanted to make sure that the design of the initiative was really based on this insider outsider gatekeeping issue became really, really easy to. It was done in ways that allowed us unique access, but also in ways that enhanced the sort of initiatives partners wanted. So each of the sites were so different, right? One was all about shallots because shallots was talk about. The other one, this Rompegading site that Fatwa and Anna were talking about. Oh, well, if we want to think about environmental issues, we think about very quickly, it became a question of, oh no, we're studying peanuts all of a sudden, something that nobody had thought of before we here. And yeah, from visa issues to just design to respect and to like institutional partners, I think working with working with partners in a way that gives them that sort of authority and leeway in deciding and kind of guiding the process was really important to avoiding a lot of both static and content level challenges.
What are some research methods that you think were effective or particularly challenging that you haven't discussed? I guess, Olivia, you did research methods training with people before. I would like to hear more about that because of Mary's class. Thanks.
Do I get to participate? I'm in Mary's class. Yeah. So the method exposed to before leaving in our field school boot camp were interviewing, participant observation, with story maps themselves were sort of the main ones that we were trained on. And then, when we got to the field, I think for me, a lot of those changed as I started to focus more on the methods. But what I want to make clear about that is, well, I was and Vika and Sarah and Dila and Micah, we had 6 or 7 people with us at a time. And so all of us were able to sort of focus on our strengths. And as a part of being a part of a group, we were able to sort of fill in all of the gaps. So really super important. And now I find myself quite experienced in the methods class, but also not clear that, you sort of restrict yourself from exploring any other methods, because a lot of it is with the ideas of I'm going to do this and this is going to work, and you realize, shoot, there's no cell phone reception, or have to adapt and evolve these other methods, some of which you read about and some, but you can only train so much before you go into the field and realize what.
Like students from agriculture department, and their methods are heavily quantitative, right? So we talk a little bit in our reflection too about how perhaps in the graduate students from the partner university could also be involved as well. As in our presentation, for example, our partners, they really want
to be, I think, inevitable, and we get to experience that in the field. in the ball, and we get to experience that in the field. And like after seeing Anna's presentation, I think this is the 4th time I'm seeing the Rampa guiding team. I've always enjoyed, or I've always liked their way of adapting to the lack of connection, and they use all of their different watches just to get the GIS map. I think that is something that we could learn, we could bring to our own research as well.
Steve, do you have a question?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so as a field school, participatory methods, learning, lot being said about what the students gain from it. What did the community gain from it? And what's the disbursement of the knowledge to the community?
Okay. That's a big question, and it's a really important one. So I will speak from the Indonesia team perspective, because that's the one I went on. The strategies and the giving back to community answer for the Thai team is likely to be a bit different. But we worked with Fatwa's organization. He's a young researcher, but it's part of Force and Society Research Group. And the way that we decided on the eventual research projects were related to existing initiatives that were taking place there. So some of it is very political, some of it's very strategic, some of it is very research-based, and others are just training grounds for young researchers, right? So these are really interesting conversations in terms of ethics and environmental ethics. We could see the history of the state, for example, creating boundaries and leading to access and exclusion for some farmers and others based on how their access to power, and really learned about how institutions worked in these places. And we were constantly asking that question, right? What is the benefit? What is the giving back aspect of this initiative? And at times it was just as simple as it allows young researchers to learn new methods to be able to do this sort of works, to do this sort of research method, to learn how to listen better to local communities and incorporate that into your research. For others, it was, there's these boundary issues. These are very real forest conflict issues, right? So there is the challenge of the Hasanuddin University actually being a landowner of the state forest that has enclosed certain areas and decided to plant pine trees in areas that used to be ancestral homes and field cultivation of people that has led to a lot of out-migration. Now, how do you deal with structural issues that have been in place in a location that for a long time? Ours is not like we go to the government office and offer solution. It's to listen well, to understand how to understand problems better. So being much more diagnostic about issues, to presenting back to our local informants, right? The people we talked to, the homes that we stayed at, building relationships. I mean, in so many ways, we talked about the complexity of that question and what actually means giving back, right? And giving back to some might, the people that you choose to stay with means you don't stay with somebody else. So one household is benefiting over another. So the complexity of that was really, really interesting and was something we talked about all the time. But others, if you have some insights into that question, I think it's really important. In terms of the community too, so this is the first field school that we went to Southeast Asia, had the hosts really support us in doing this. But it's also, as part of this Luce Foundation project, it's also an exchange, right? So Fatwa and other researchers are going to be coming to Hawaii to learn, study, and be part of research initiatives here, which really shows the continuity. And I really want to highlight the legacy of building these relationships and highlighting these type of research topics, the implications of what people choose to do in their research next, in terms of how it shapes careers, people who are interested in Southeast Asia and environmental issues in these ways, I think are really profound. I'm really fortunate. I have to tell this story. In 2005, I did a study abroad program with the SIT. I went to Yunnan, China, Southwest China. And at the East-West Fest a couple months ago, I ran into Lu Yuan, who is in this room, and had a profound impact on my life. So studying on Hutiaosha, the Tiger Leaping Gorge, dam building initiatives, interviewing people about the implications of building a dam in a place. And that shaped how I wanted to do and think about research for what I did after that. So I think that providing the avenues of people to be able to go out and do this sort of research in places to make relationships with people like Dilla, across age groups, as well as through research initiatives, has a really, really big influence on what people to choose to do in the future. But I want to take that point and actually turn it over to our student panelists and ask them, having done this research, gone out to these places, how do you think of how it influenced what research you will do, what you will do next, and potentially how it changes your research topics and you're thinking about these issues?
So I research carbon offsets in Timor-Leste, and I think a profound impact that this field school has impacted me is developing interest in other countries in Southeast Asia, because this was my first time traveling to mainland Southeast Asia. I'm more familiar with like a Timor-Leste and Indonesia, and even though my study focuses in the regional aspect of the Southeast Asia, but really don't know much about other regions. And so the field school has cultivated in me a new interest about in water and water infrastructure. And it was hard to learn a lot about like aquifer recharge, which is such a geography thing. Like if you ask political scientists, they don't know what is an aquifer recharge or how do they work. But it allows me to see like where people get their water, how government influences who gets water, and this is something that I think about what I want to do after my doctorate program too. So really learn a lot about how Southeast Asia is not a monolithic region, but different countries have very different ways of being and different geographies, and yeah.
So I think the field school sort of maybe perhaps changed me as a academic and as a student more than it changed my actual research in and of itself. Only 2 years for a master's program, and at the start of this field school I had already completed my first year. So in terms of the impact that it had on the research that I'm doing, less sort of visible there. I'm sticking to more of a theoretical discourse analysis, kind of isolated from any sort of field experience. This field school made me glad I made that choice, because it exposed the intricacies and sort of time and energy and effort that goes into field work, and I really didn't have time for that in these very short 2 years. So it affirmed that choice, but also sort of, I think, demystified field work in a lot of ways, and made it a lot more approachable. Not to say that it is an easy thing to do by any means. I'm terrified to have to organize field work by myself and not be a part of a 10-member team. But it definitely, I think, made me way more interested in the idea of collaborative research, both with people from my own university, but with people from local universities, because I think truly that was where our greatest strengths lied. And I think a lot of fieldwork in geography tends to have sort of a single researcher perspective to it. And you don't get to hear a lot about this sort of team aspect, but it's definitely a real and very valid form of research. So it definitely turned my interest more to that.
Great, thanks. Dalila, I'll invite you to go next since you're about to embark on your field research in several days.
Thanks, Micah. Well, I think one thing that's stuck to me is that the precarity of field work, because we're coming into the field and we have all these trainings using interviews and taking field notes and observations. We did that. It's just that there are some things that you can predict on the field, right? And having like research questions in place, some people have it, and then once you get to the field, everything changed. So I think embracing that uncertainty is a good start, and I'm trying to implement that and try not to panic, because uncertainty, you know, can cause a lot of issues to some people. And that precarity, I think it builds character as well, and for some people. And then the whole idea of embracing this precarity, I'm thinking of it in such like how the Rampagaring were doing it, like they improvise and adapt to the internet connection there. So that's one way of looking at it. I think another thing that I take from this field school is that having a reciprocal relationship with your community. You don't just go to the, you know, to stay with them and then gather all the sources that you can get and trying to extract as much knowledge as possible without giving back. But if you're going to give back through journal articles, I'm not sure to what extent they're going to read it. So there are different ways of giving back and using them. Not using them as per se, but using them as a way to collaborate, like make them as your collaborators and make them have an active role in your research. I think that's one way of looking at it too. Yeah, and I think I didn't know that, well, kind of have an idea, but I didn't know being creative was possible, like what Anna was doing too, what the Rampagaring was doing too. Like with the whole life annotations, I mentioned it earlier. So try to be creative. I think that's what I'm trying to take to the field as well, being more nimble and being able to adapt to the situation then.
We wish you all the best of luck. It's a really exciting time to go to the field. Finally, for Fatwa was a really interesting kind of example, because while we were in the field, he was defending his master's thesis, and we all got the pre-presentation of his master's. But having done that, how did the experience change you and your plans for what's next?
Okay, thank you. So yeah, because you mentioned about it, so I was still a master's student when this program started, and when this program ends, I was already a master. I got a master degree, so this was amazing. This was an amazing moment for me. So yeah, I just finished my master study. I just wanna started my, let's see, my research career, and then for now, I just wanna visit Hawaii first, improve my English skill, and get involved with the other any activities in East West Center and Hawaii University in general, and then planning my future research. But about the follow-up collaborative research with these people, actually we already did. We already started through the. We plan to attend a conference at Yogyakarta next year, 2024 in July. And we already draft our abstract, individual abstract, team abstract, and panel abstract about the what we got from the this field school. And yeah, I'm always super excited to continue our collaborative research. But let me first to visit Hawaii and plan together in Honolulu. So yeah,
We look forward to meeting you in Hawaii. We're at time. There's still refreshments for those who are here in the room. There's comments, but we have to end the webinar for today. I want to say a couple things before we close out. The first is that education and learning has really changed a lot since COVID. You know, people are rethinking the ways that we engage online and the way that you do research and training in initiatives like this. I think field schools or study abroad or whatever it might be, working, whether it's locally or transnationally or initiatives like this. I think people have really done a lot of different initiatives to implement them. I think they're really hard to do, but I think they're also extremely worthwhile. And I hope everybody got that out of these reflections and pictures and stories that you've heard today. And I think it really provides the basis for thinking about how to do this stuff even better. And I think, especially working across country contexts, the collaborations might be really difficult. And just to reinforce how much working with trust with local institutions, continuing to ask what sort of environmental ethics and who this benefits, right? Whether it's just research and research findings, approaches to doing research, as well as changing the institutions that we come from. I think this provides a really interesting kind of pilot initiative about how to design such things going forward. So thanks to the Luce Foundation, thanks to the UH Center for Southeast Asian Studies and all the people that were involved in supporting this. And I do hope that it lends to better research and engagement for a long time to come. Aloha, everyone. Thanks for coming.